I had to come on here first because you could imagine I had all of these news media requests for me to go on and give my thoughts and perspective. But I said, you know what? I can't do that to Shy. I got to come on here first.
Yeah.
I think I said in the Borderland interview
Mm-hmm.
that he wouldn't last past this year. I think that um, the United States, and President Trump, you know, had their eyes on him, and it did surprise me, especially when you see the reports that what is it, the Delta Team 2 went over there.
Mm-hmm.
So a couple weeks later, this happens. I'm not surprised, right? I think all that pressure really added up and put the pressure on the Mexican government to do something about this. But I'm just surprised how people like start to talk about some of these individuals like they're superheroes or gods or something.
Right.
Uh, they could die just like everyone else. Like all the men they send out to die each and every day out there fighting, a stupid war. And it's unfortunate. Like it's a great, I think it's great overall for like the people. But sadly, the innocent people are the ones that are going to be suffering, right? Look at the business they are burning down, and it's probably going to be like this for the next couple of days at least until they run out of bullets, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I listened to you cover the El Traidor with Vicente.
Mm-hmm.
What did Mayo say? He said the government has more bullets than them,
Mm.
and everyone knows that they're not going to beat the government when the government really wants to take action. That good things can happen, and you're seeing it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the whole thing about like, I think Mencho, I think he was the one that was responsible for the violence, right? And
Mm-hmm.
just like after the setups, right? Because he's the one that had to help them, clean up the setups because everyone had a problem how violent and vicious they were, and he kind of took it to another level where there was no respect,
Mm-hmm.
and he's the one that kind of made the cartel be militarized as you see it today, and it's sad because it's gonna, we already know what's gonna happen. There's gonna be inner fighting and splinter cells and fractions, and the innocent are the only ones that suffer. To the world, to the people that don't know no better, Mencho was the face, right? He was the ultimate leader of the CJNG, right? But
Mm-hmm.
the people who do know that he always been the arm, right? The head of the arm wing of the cartel, and he was considered the boss. Real
YouTube.
bosses were Los Queenies, right? And the Queenie right now got extradited a few months ago in the last group, and everyone, I think, like except for two people, have been cooperating with U.S. authorities, right?
Mm-hmm.
And and a lot of people don't know who the Queenie is, but he's I mentioned brother-in-law, um, and he was the ultimate. He was the drug trafficker. He was the one with the money,
Mm-hmm.
and Mencho was the arm, the head of the armed wings, and he always been that person. He's always been the violent one. Um, I had, a good personal relationship with him, as you know, and I will tell you this, that I'm not sure if it matters, but that he had more balls than your average, maybe because even when it came with his group of sicarios, he came himself to rescue my brother and I. Yeah, he came himself. I'm talking about military up, like vest, utility vest, his AR-15 with grenade launcher and all his men. And it was the first time I actually see them move in action like that, like with grenade launchers, rocket launchers, right,
Mm-hmm.
ready to die, and for sure that surprised me because I didn't think that it was that he would have gone himself, and I think that type of, I guess, valor, right, or whatever you want to call it, showed his men that he was, about that life. So it's not surprised me that if he was killed in this military operation by the Mexican government, that he died fighting. Um, and again, remember, it's all legacy. He sees everything that's happened to so many people, the bosses before him, and it's something that he was going to go through, right? And what's ironic about this guy is that those areas where they're saying that he was found is
Mm-hmm.
the same places he was at when I was around.
Right.
So, yeah, again, I was been keeping up with the news all morning, and it's sad now they're burning down businesses and targeting the innocent, the hardworking people as always, right? They're
Mm-hmm.
the ones that pay the ultimate price.
Absolutely. Somebody said El Pirata de Culiacan gonna get his payback. Rest in peace, El Pirata, because for whatever for whatever he said, he didn't deserve to go out the way he did.
Yeah, but I mean, just I mean, we know pirata, but just imagine all the
Oh, all the others,
hun-
absolutely.
how the hundreds of innocent people from even the law enforcement officers. We all know that there's corruption in Mexican government and in law enforcement, but a lot of those who suffer through the violence try are not the people who are negotiating the bribes, right? They're not the leaders. They're always going to target the officers who are in deployment, and doing the job. So there's so many, hundreds of, and thousands of innocent people that have suffered a violent death because of them.
What do you think? You think the alliance cost him? You think the Chapitos put the finger on him?
You know what? I'm not sure about that, but I think the alliance, remember last year or whenever we were going through this, and they were saying the alliance, and we had actually a live where we talked about, like, what does that mean? People, oh, it made them stronger. Like, how? That's ridiculous. Okay, nothing changed, but I do think that the cause and effect of the Chapillos and the Mayos and everything is what really caused that death overall, right? The violence, and Donald Trump is the one that I think cost him his life. It's overall, right? Conspiracy theories. We could think that somebody could have been cooperating, but to me, it's obvious. You have um, some of the most important figures in that organization that are trying to save themselves. Shy, another Vicente, right? So if you look up Abigail Valencia El Queenie, I mean, he was the Mayo of that organization. Just say, right? And when you have those type of people coming to the United States, being extradited, and now they're looking at a life in prison in ADX, they start cooperating. It's always going to come from the inside, right? Now we could blame many factors, and how he died. I know that those we're going to see all kinds of conflicted reports, right? It doesn't change the fact that he's dead, right? And obviously, by the reaction of his, the cartel, it must have happened in the hands of the Mexican military, right? Because if not, they wouldn't be taking that, you know, taking the violence out to the streets right now, right? I knew corruption existed, right? I could tell you, so many stories about that, but I think uh, in that day, when everything happened, when they came to rescue us in 2007, it was the first time I had been involved in an operation like that. Uh, and I was so surprised because I lived in Puerto Vallarta, right, for many years.
Mm,
So we always understood how the government operated, how the military operated, and I was so surprised that to see the power he had there,
mm.
where all his armed men were, seriously, I'm talking about dozens of pickups, rocket launchers, and I remember when they rescued us, that they took us away from the AFI, uh, and they separated me and my brother, so that just in case the government came and they said, well, if we have to fight it out again, they, at least you guys won't be killed, together, right?
Mm.
And I remember going through, heading back to a very popular spot right outside of Puerto Vallarta, right, in Punta de Mita, and there's a military checkpoint, and I was nervous, Shy. I'll tell you like that. I'll be the only person that comes on the chat, I guess, or talks about this, or someone who's involved in the cartel that will say, you can call me a little bitch or whatever. But
Mm.
I was scared, seeing that the checkpoint was coming up, and we're riding, right, 15, 20 trucks deep, with guys hanging out the pickup, and I'm riding in the same vehicle as he is, and I tell him, I voiced it like, like, damn. I said, y qué vamos a hacer del chequeo, ¿verdad? He's like, tú, he told me, tú calmado, eh. And as we were driving by, they just nodded to him. They were coming by, they waved their two fingers, and they opened up the rail went up, and I was like, holy shit,
Right.
like, this is the real deal. Not
Yeah,
only
you got
that,
that. They got
even to
that
get out
juice,
of there,
juice.
Shy, like, it's because it's Puerto Vallarta, and I'm talking about maybe the southern end. It's Puerto Vallarta, Nueva Vallarta, Costa Banderas. Punta de Mita, and then as you're leaving, you have some of the other areas. Like when it was time for us to go, we had a convoy of cartel members and federal police escorting us, uh, back to Guadalajara, uh, and you know it's different when you're paying government people off and you don't really get to see it like that.
Mm.
But when you
BD5150
get to
just
witness it
subscribed on
firsthand,
YouTube.
like it's totally different. It feels different, right?
And not only that, this is many years ago before he became what he became.
100%. But even then, I share stories, and I know I'm going to talk about it in my book and some of the stuff that we're doing, is that he wasn't my type of person. You get me? Like seriously, I guess I never liked that tough guy mentality, right? You know how it is, right? And he was violent, and he was just not my type of coffee, right? Or my cup of coffee, I should say.
Mm.
Um, he was like that for real, and he was totally different from all the bosses that I've been around. And remember, I been around, Chapo Mayo, Vicente, the Nacho Coronels,
Mm.
and so many of the uh, you know, old kind of cartel heads, right? That were different. And I knew that the minute we started, like, having that relationship, and I started kind of getting to know him,
Mm.
that he was a different breed. Okay,
Mm.
he had a different mentality. Like, and I remember him telling me back then. I remember him telling me, we had a discussion. He told me, "Aquí lo único que banda son mis huevos." He told me, "The only thing that rules is my balls." He said,
Mm.
and I was like, all right, whatever. But um, yeah, I think that as we've seen in the years since then, right, that his reputation precedes him, right?
There's reports from the BBC that he was injured during transport.
Unless they try to rescue him during the transport,
That's a
right?
possibility too, right?
Because they're experts at that, and if you even see even in the book of Traidor that you've been translating in English, right? So whoever hasn't paid attention or hasn't viewed or hasn't heard Shai's translation to El Traidor, which is the traitor from Vicente Zambada, and they talk about those operations, right, all the time, about rescue operations, and a lot of those operations succeed. We just heard from Mini League's interview that even Mayo, right, was arrested and released, right?
Mm.
I'm not sure if those. I mean, I would take his word for it, right?
Mm.
But those operations are consistent. They happen all the time. As you recall, I think it was in 2013, I believe. There was a military operation that involved that um, the Cielo, and it was that they had captured Alfredo Guzman.
Mm.
Um, and even then, when it was the American government, because I was on the other side of it, actually, like it was a step by step kind of an into operation
Mm.
when they went to arrest them, and all the everything they had was the 100%. They knew where he was at. They knew who he was with. They seen him. They had intelligence of him going into this residence. They did all that. But they did not let the American agents go in with them on the operation, right?
Mm.
And an hour later, the wrong person shows up,
Mm.
And I remember they pulled me out for me to identify if that was
Boogieworks just
Alfredo
subscribed
Guzman,
on
and
YouTube.
I'm like, what he's been doing? Eating? Did he grow, 5 inches and gain 200 pounds? Because who is this person, you know? And I remember the government were like, "Are you serious?" I'm like, "I'm absolutely serious. This ain't him."
Well, I mean, that's the same thing they did with y'all, no?
Well, I mean, that was the backup plan, but not really. They came and they did a roadblock right before we got to the Puerto Vallarta.
No,
Uh,
no, no. I'm talking about switching y'all out in the car with two other cualquieras.
well, so here's how it happened.
So hold on, let me give context for those that don't know. What I'm referring to is a situation where Mencho's men came to liberate J&P from kidnapping, and from my understanding, they switched out. The Americans were coming for them, so they switched out two anybody's for the boys and for the twins and put them in the car. So Jay, you could go on from there. Let this noto drop. Boom. All right, you can go from there.
So I guess that's true as well.
Mm-hmm.
But the way it really happened was that at Puerto Vallarta from Vallarta. to the airport, it's only like at that time, I'm not sure if things changed. It's only one way to get to the airport, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And what they did, they set up a roadblock, like if there was a military on in Vallarta in a street, and they just set up a roadblock and just waited. And once they're smart about it because what they did is that they hit on the back end, and and they have lookouts, and once they knew that the convoy, our convoy of long, with the AFI was coming towards the airport, they popped out on the front end. And when they stopped, we see them maybe 500 yards, right? They stopped and they tried to reverse out, but they already have got blocked in.
Mm-hmm.
So as the Sicarios uh, just basically surrounded the trucks, they told them like directed them to go into a street. And me being inside, they were asking, "What should we do?" In the radios, and they're like, "Just do it," because we were out in a busy intersection,
Mm-hmm.
and they directed them into a side street, and right when we turned the side street is when I kind of see that there was about 40, 50 men, the ones I could see in front,
Mm-hmm.
and they had bazookas pointing at the vehicles, okay,
Mm-hmm.
and Mencho was there, and they didn't let us get to the airport. So what they did is, like, once they released us and once that kind of happened,
Mm-hmm.
what they did was they just as a show, just in case, just to cover their asses as well,
Mm-hmm.
they gave them two of their men, in our place. You
Mm-hmm.
get me? So it was like I'm gonna take them,
Mm-hmm.
but here, you get me?
Yeah,
Here's
here's
the
the
replacement.
cancellation prize. We'll give you
Yeah.
an excuse. We'll give you an out.
And I remember because they introduced me to the guys, and they were two, just young, you know, guys with a really bad haircut. They balded them. You
Mm-hmm.
could have, those do-it-yourself haircuts, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they were like drinking, they were drunk, and I was like, damn, I I told him, like, thank you, and he was like, oh no, it's all good. They gave us Coke, and gave us a bottle of Bucanes to get drunk, to act like they were partying, and
Right.
yeah. So it was one of those things where here's your prize. Like, we don't want to, uh, create the heat as well, like, on ourselves. But yeah, that was like, I had, before that actual, that was the first time I actually met him in person, but I had spoken to him over the phone,
Mm-hmm.
and a few times prior to that. So I didn't really know that his, like, what he actually did, because at that time he was part of the Federation, but more part of El Milenio cartel,
Mm-hmm.
which existed, and that was Los Queenies, Lobo Valencia,
Mm-hmm.
and all that. That was the group that was running Guadalajara at that time, and those surrounding areas, the Jalisco, Manzanillo. Um, and by the way, all these leaders, and I always want to point out, right, Shai,
Mm-hmm.
because it goes back to some of your stories, is they all cooperated. The people who hadn't died, they all got caught. They all cooperated, including the head of the Millennium Cartel, who was Lobo Valencia, who was the head of the Millennium Cartel. He's actually the one that he testified in Menchito's trial,
Mm-hmm.
and in a couple of trials. He's out. He's free, um, as well, and he's related to Los Queenies. So uh, that was he was part of that armed wing back then, and his plaza was the Puerto Vallarta Plaza and the Nuevo Vallarta,
Mm-hmm.
um, at that time, where he was the person in charge there
Mm-hmm.
for that group. So
Crazy, crazy times. The game has changed, bro. The face of this shit is different.
yeah, I think it's very different. But I'm gonna tell you something. It's not gonna be like last time you have one of these things, okay? Because I think that it's coming for the Chapillos, and Mayito as well, right? I don't think the arrest and killings is over. I think that this is just the beginning. So I think it's gonna come for Los Chapillos and everyone else. I will tell you something. One thing I know firsthand what happens when stuff like this happens is that the rest of the groups, the rest of the people are shaking in their boots, right?
Mm-hmm.
Literally, because when we're seeing it and people see it from the outside in,
Mm-hmm.
And you know this, Shy, right? You have all the commentators or the internet gangsters, right?
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like fun, right? It looks like a movie,
Mm-hmm.
but that's real life for them, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And by then they kind of know already what happened, so that is gonna worry everyone else who's involved, right?
Mm-hmm.
People who are wanted, because that's what's coming for them. Right
Right.
now I'm sure they're throwing out anything that's intelligence, any phones or anything like that that's intelligence. So it's unfortunate because you know what, you could imagine what's going to come with it. There's a lot of innocent people, a lot of governmental office, officials are going to probably be targeted, and so forth, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to be the case, the same thing with whoever is still out there, and in terms of los chapillos, El Mayito, and all of them. I think you mentioned we were talking about Menchito, right? People forget he took it to trial, but that's after he cooperated,
Mm-hmm.
after he tried to reach
A deal.
a deal,
Mm-hmm.
and then he didn't like it because I think he was still looking at life sentence.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think that's gonna open the door, right? Now that his
Mm.
father is gone, for him to come back because you know their family is gonna be in danger eventually, right?
Right.
You know, so it's like it's people don't, they, especially in today's time, they can't comprehend how each one of your decisions, always gonna affect your family and the innocent, right? Um, some way somehow, and also let's not forget that law enforcement and the military, for lack of better words, they're gangster too. Okay,
Right.
they're a cartel too. They're you bother us,
Right.
we bother you. Um, they're gangsters with badges basically.
Right.
So
I don't doubt it.
one of the other things that a lot of people might not know is that Mencho was a low level drug trafficker, right, or a low level a hustler out in the San Francisco area, San Bernardino somewhere, and he was caught like selling, whatever, you know, dime bags or $20 bags of meth back in the day. So he has experience, trafficking, for a while, and he's always been a weed guy too,
Mm-hmm.
Well, back then he was a weed guy before the meth, and uh, his family, the Valencias, right, which um, Mencho married Armando Valencia's baby mama.
Mm-hmm.
So it happens too, right? It happens in Mexico too. Armando Valencia's was one of the biggest drug traffickers in Michoacan area, right? In the late 90s, early 2000s, who was affiliated with the Lord of the Skies, as you know, everyone was at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a big pusher, and they consider him to be the king of crystal meth. I think it'd be great for you to cover him. A lot of people don't know him.
Mm-hmm.
His name's Armando Valencia. He was captured by the military. I want to say in 2003, I believe, 2002. Anyway, he was quietly extradited, cooperated, and now is living free in Los Angeles area.
Hmm.
As a matter of fact, I was researching him, that he actually like put in like a civil complaint so that a newspaper didn't publish his name or where he lived. Ironically,
He wants
in
his
LA.
privacy protected, you know.
Yeah, I think we all do, right? Yeah, but I will say, I think for Mexico, he in Mencho, he is one of the last bosses. Like one of the last big bosses that I think is gonna exist, right? Because I just don't see the American government, or the Mexican government allowing someone to get that big. And again, if there's anyone to blame, it's them, right? The
Mm-hmm.
shy.
Mm-hmm.
You don't, these are people who are coming up, and you don't let the you need the government, the Mexican government's basically permission, for you to get to those levels.
Right.
And I think that they won't make those mistakes ever again.
Yeah, they let the nails dig in so deep that it's like, where you at? It's burning now.
Yeah, you do it, and now next thing you know, that same person is the one that has a hold of you. And also they try to kill the Secretary of State of Mexico, the Secretary of Defense, whatever. Um, that's going after these cartels, right?
Mm-hmm.
Ironically, there's been a lot of evidence, and there's some. people that I know that used to be part of the DEA, some retired DEA officers that had real, evidence that he was one time working with the CJ&G, Omar, who was it?
Garcia
Omar, who?
Harfouk.
Yeah,
Yeah, they said
Garcia
in the
Harfu.
in the trader book they said his father was plugged too.
Yep. And oh yeah, recently in the trader book, I forgot to I heard that part of it, and wherever there's smoke, there's fire, right? When you have government officials and someone like Annabelle Hernandez stating that, but now I guess things don't work out. You start working for a different group or something like that, and next thing you know, the same people that you were in business with now try to assassinate you, right?
What do you think this would do for the American drug trade? Is it business as usual? Listen, I've been waiting to see, you know, uh, powder heads panicking and drug addicts panicking in the streets since this war started, and it seems like everything's business as usual. Will this make a difference?
It's gonna make a difference. I believe it's gonna make a difference with the inner fighting, and I think we spoke about this the other day, right? What it does is that, and listen to a trader, and you talk about so many alliances and so many government officials that someone like Elmayo Zambada, right, had under his right
Mm-hmm.
his toolbox, and he goes away. The big government officials just can't trust people, right?
Mm-hmm.
They don't go looking for the next mile because there isn't one.
Mm-hmm.
But what's gonna happen is for many, and I say this in some of my trainings, like they're not the only drug traffickers. They're the most known. They control a big majority of the drug trade. But when I say they control, because there's a lot of independents that make up, you know to me, it's like if you take some of these cartels and some of the bosses and some of their um, organizations directly, I think that they're probably responsible for 30-40% of the drugs that enter the United States and go elsewhere, across the world. But it's the other 60-70%
Mm-hmm.
that are really the ones that
They cashing in.
they're the ones that cash in, right? Because now they don't have the eyes of the government and the inside fighting. I do believe that it could slow down, right, as everyone tries to gather and take some of that, you know, I guess, opportunities but the boss wasn't out there selling drugs. The boss wasn't out there,
Mm-hmm.
unloading a submarine and transporting, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So, but obviously, I think this is good overall for everyone, no matter what. And you know what's funny? I always say this, like, oh man, the statue. We don't even talk about the statue of Mencho. Mencho was had to be like 5'5". I kid you not, 5'5", 5'4". He was probably 120, 130 pounds. He was like a one of those horse jockeys, you know.
No shit.
Uh, but he was one of those violent, brave, individuals.
Right.
But again, I'm gonna predict that this is gonna be the same thing that's gonna happen to the Chapillos and to the Mayitos, for sure. People like I think his days are number two, to El Chapo Isidro, um, because now you have government, American government, who's basically gonna, fight, you know, power with power, right? So
Well,
for
I
those
mean, we need to
individuals,
start looking at these wanted posters and do a deduction of who's left on these wanted posters because a lot of them have been collected.
yeah, and I think that the easiest thing, Shy, is that everyone's asking, well, who's gonna take his place? It's like it doesn't always work that way, It doesn't always work like, oh, this next person, but within their organization, for sure, they're gonna know how to align themselves.
What
And
does it work like?
um, depending, right? I see that there's different people being talked about, but again, it might be that way. That's the easiest thing to say is whoever's closest to him, whoever's more aligned with him, or could have seen his vision or had an understanding of it. But they're going to be someone that person didn't like in the same cartel. That's going to be like, F you,
Mm-hmm.
I ain't doing that. And it's all whoever has the most people. But again, all these things are going to, what you're going to see in the next couple days, weeks, and sometime to come, is you're going to see the violent part of it. That to me really doesn't mean anything, but just for the outside, right? Like, 'cause they don't die, Shy. these Sicarios die every day, and the bosses keep just putting different ones
Yeah,
in their
paper
place, right?
plates, disposable soldiers.
Yeah, a lot of people have a lot, feel a certain way about Donald Trump. But look, and just in terms of the drug trafficking and drug trade, right? And they might not agree with some of his tactics, but I will tell you something. From all my life being involved in drug trafficking since a younger age, I think that I had never imagined that we could be at a time like this with so many arrests, so many extraditions, indictments, personnel being killed, and you have some of the biggest jugglers in the world gone in 2 years. Okay, first Chapo, then everyone that's came after that from the biggest drug lord to me. I know people say the most powerful drug lord was Mencho. Like he was violent, but he was no Mayo. I'll tell you that much.
Mexico's most wanted man and leader of the feared Jalisco New Generation cartel has been killed by the army in a security operation, the country's defense ministry said. Nemesio Ceguera Cervantes, known as El Mencho, was killed during a military operation carried out at dawn on Sunday in the town of Tapalpa in the central western state of Jalisco. The defense ministry said several CJNG members were killed during the operation, while El Mencho was seriously wounded. He died while being transferred by air to Mexico City. That makes all the sense in the world right there. CJNG has spread from its original power base in Jalisco to have an almost nationwide presence across Mexico. In its statement, the Defense Ministry also said that several armored vehicles and weapons, including rocket launchers, were seized during the operation. It added that 3 members of the military were wounded during the incident and taken to the hospital in Mexico City for emergency treatment. It added that 3 members of the military were wounded during the incident and taken to the hospital in Mexico City for emergency treatment. Throughout Sunday, there were reports of cars being set on fire and sightings of gunmen on the streets in Jalisco and everywhere else. We're seeing a bus here blocking the street, on fire, gutted already. It says the governor of Jalisco, Pablo Lemus Navarro, on social media advised residents of the state to adhere to a code red warning and avoid leaving their home. The U.S. State Department also issued a shelter in place warning for U.S. citizens in Jalisco, Tamaulipas, and areas of Michoacan, Guerrero, and Nuevo Leon. The Mexican Defense Ministry said the U.S. has supplied Mexico with information that assisted its operation. Right? They've been saying that shit. Former U.S. Ambassador to Mexico and Deputy Secretary of State Christopher Landau said on social media that El Mencho's death was a great development for Mexico, the U.S., Latin America, and the world. The U.S. had previously offered a $15 million reward for information, 15 million for information leading to El Mencho's capture. All right, does anybody catch that? I don't know if nobody gonna catch that reward. I ain't never seen it. I ain't never heard about it, but we'll see. What do you think of that scenario, Jay? Scenario that it went down. He was injured, and then he didn't make it. On the way to wherever they were headed to.
You know what? I have to point out now the other side of it. This you're gonna agree with this, Shy. What I have always seen is that drives me crazy because I seen it for themselves when I was around where they have rocket launchers, bro, grenade launchers, uh, the 40 millimeter grenade launchers, right? And they never use them. How come we haven't heard of them using them? How come they got caught, right? And but just to point out, Shai, like Culiacan has probably a million people, right? And we all know it's like a narco right city, but like some of these like Puerto Vallarta is a tourist place, okay? You probably have it's at least a couple million people or a million people visiting there all the time, for their beaches. They have a lot of hotels, resorts, and even places like Guadalajara, Guanajuato. These are major cities. This is like it happening in Chicago, right? So that's a little bit different from what you see because a lot of the times that you see these videos of people fighting are in small towns, rural areas. Just imagine if somebody was going at it in Iowa, right? But it's different for you to be seeing these you know armed gunmen in cities like Puerto Vallarta and Guadalajara and stuff like that. Um, so that's a little bit different compared to other times we had to witness something like this happening. And you've seen the same thing when they arrested Eric Valencia, who the co-founder of the CJNG, and this Eric was someone I actually knew, him and his brothers. His brother was arrested in my indictment as well.
Mm.
Uh, and again, right, they end up having a falling out, a betrayal, and they fought, as well. But I think he was arrested, I think in 2017, 2018.
Mm.
And when he was arrested, they did the same thing in Zapopan, which is the a suburb of Guadalajara, right?
Mm.
And where a lot of the companies and wealthy people live, and they burned down, buses and stuff like that. But um, yeah, however, once we do find out, however, he did pass away, he dead. You know what I'm saying?
It's a wrap.
That hasn't. There's no conflicting reports about that,
Mm.
because I've been keeping up.
It's it. The end of an era, people. Not a good one. Not one to be celebrated.